Hello and welcome to Trusts and Estates Weekly. I'm your host, Kevin Bemmel, and we're here every Monday at 10 a.m. Pacific time to talk about matters related to your own personal estate planning and estate administration, as well as for professionals who help other people plan their estates, manage their estates, administrate a probate, a trust, etc. So today I'm going to talk about what I described in social media posts as the anomalous position here in California called a probate referee. If you have one of these in another state, let me know. I couldn't find any other state that has such a position. It seems like other states, rely on their valuation professionals to do their job. Not now, to be honest, I don't know how this position came into being here in California. The charitable side of me, it, would say that, well, appraisers and other valuation practitioners are in general much more expensive than a probate referee. And so maybe this was an attempt by the state of California to save money in the administration of an estate. And like I said, that would be the charitable rationale. The uncharitable rationale would be to create this, cadre of people who have to be chosen by the state. So it gives the opportunity to sort of dole out favors and that sort of thing. Again, I don't know if either of those is accurate, or two things can be true at the same time, even though they seem to be in opposition. But in any event, I've mentioned probate referees before, and what they are. This is essentially a position in California that one applies for, takes an exam, and then is appointed to. Full disclosure, I think 25 years ago or more, I applied to become a probate referee. I think I took the exam, as I recall, because originally it was scheduled on a Saturday, and I observe a traditional Jewish Sabbath, so I couldn't take the exam on a Saturday. So I got special permission to take it on a Tuesday or something. But the long and the short of it was I did not receive an appointment. Don't know why. Never asked. Didn't think I would get an answer even if I did. But in retrospect, it was a good thing that I didn't get it because it wasn't the sort of work I think I would have enjoyed. So I'm going to talk about the process. Well, actually, I'll talk about the process of becoming a probate referee first. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. And here is the section for the state, or the website for the state of California that deals with probate referees. Now, you will note that the process takes place through the California State Controller's Office. The controller is the person who deals with money for the state of California. Why the probate referees are appointed through the controller's office, again, who knows? But in any event, they are appointed through the state controller's office, but they work essentially within the probate court system. Okay, and so if we click here on this, you'll see there's a list by county, okay, of probate referees, and here they all are. And I'm going to go to the ones for Los Angeles just to show you something that I think is a little bit interesting. Okay, so this is Los Angeles Central. Okay, now here's, Christina Acevedo. She works in Sierra Madre. Okay, no big deal. Here's Brian Anson, works, in Tarzana. Again, I think just your, kind of your typical individual. Here's Stephen Bethel. His office is in the U.S. Bank Tower in downtown Los Angeles. Those are pretty expensive digs. I don't know. Well, you can see his email here is Fraser Capital. So, he has some other, pretty big things going on, it would appear. So you can see that probate referees run the gamut. Right here, of this one for Brian Anson Probe Ref. It appears that is what he does. He's a probate referee, and doesn't have anything else he does. So, if you just scroll down these, you'll kind of get a feeling for them. Most, I think, are individual practitioners. Some are not too, like this person, Morris Mainstain, is not too far. His office is not too far from me. Irving Reitman. Okay, so they're in the same building, interestingly enough, in the same suite. I think Irving Reifman is also an accountant, if memory serves. So you can get an idea of what the background are of these folks. There's not a lot of them. Here in Los Angeles, it looks like there's about maybe 10 or 15, something like that. Okay, so that's, in terms of people, that's who they are. Now, you can see that the probate referee has to take an examination. They have to make an application. We'll just look at the application. You can see it's a 4-page application. They ask you all kinds of questions, entrance requirements, possession of a bachelor's degree in any field, plus 30 hours in appraisal and valuation classes. Okay. At least 2,000 hours of experience within the last 4 years appraising real and or personal property. Now, that's a lot. When you consider, even if someone is working 40 hours a week, okay, times 50 hours. Okay, well, that would be 1 year of full-time appraisal practice. But most appraisers who run their own practices, they're not actually appraising property, literally 40 hours a week, probably more like 20 or 30, right? So you're really talking about, this is time that you accumulate over probably at least a couple of years, if not more. Okay, certification as an appraiser by the California Office of Real Estate Appraisers, the Appraisal Institute, the American Society of Appraisers. These are, so the first one is an actual license. They call this certification because there are different levels of appraisal licenses. One is a license, which allows you only to do smaller residential transactions. And then you have a general certified, which allows you to appraise any kind of real estate, and a residential certified, which allows you essentially to appraise most types of residential real estate. Okay, the Appraisal Institute or the American Society of Appraisers, they have certifications. These are private organizations. The qualifications to get them are quite rigorous. Okay. Now, if you're an attorney with a minimum of 3 years as a member of the California State Bar, you will evidently automatically qualify. And a certified public accountant with 3 years as a CPA, again, you automatically qualify. So then you have to provide references, 5 of them. Okay, and here's your education, high school, etc., business correspondence, trade, service schools. Okay, and then here's your experience. Okay, and then they ask you to attach details about your background, including the appraisal of various types of real estate, tangible and intangible personal property. And then you have to, if you have any experience in probate procedure and practice or community property law, presumably this applies to lawyers, you do that. Okay, and then finally, have Have you ever acted as an expert witness or participated in hearings where testimony is taken, et cetera, et cetera? Okay, past or current public offices. Okay, and here's do you have any conflicts of interest or business activities that would preclude you from certain types of appraisals? And would you disqualify yourself if there was a conflict of interest when you were appointed as a probate referee? I would advise answering yes, because I think if you answer no, they're gonna say, okay, well, this person is out. But anyway, so this is the application that you have to file, and then you take an exam. Okay, and this repeats the qualifications here. And then it shows you, like, this year applications had to have been received by March 1st of 2024, and the exam was taken on either March 16th or March 17th, 18th, 19th. There were 4 days, and then you have to have your all your references have to be in by March 1st, et cetera. So there's an annual cycle to apply for this role. Okay, and then now you can supply all that stuff, but that doesn't guarantee that you will be appointed. Okay, that depends on the process that the state controller's office has. Honestly, I don't know what that process is. I'm not aware of any public hearings about it or anything like that. But in any event, that is essentially the process. So that's how you become a probate referee. Now, if you're I know for a lot of appraisers, business is kind of slow these days. Considerably slower over the last 12 to 18 months than it was for many years prior to that, where they were so busy. I know appraisers have been cutting their fees. And so it may be a viable alternative for you to apply to become a probate referee, especially if you're in a jurisdiction or a county, I should say, that has very few probate referees. So that might be a good adjunct to your business. Now, do keep in mind, many of these probate referees serve for literally decades. They're very entrenched. And so they may very well take umbrage if you decide to challenge what they view as their purview. So I don't know if you noticed, Lassen County, I think, had one probate referee. Now, there may not be that much work in Lassen County, so they don't need a second one. But in any event, I would say that it's definitely something to look into. Now, in terms of fees, you get 0.1% of the appraised value of whatever it is you appraise. Now, probate referees are not specialists. They are generalists. So if an estate has real estate, a business, maybe artwork, coin collections, whatever it is, the probate referee values all of those assets. Okay, so you really need to have that kind of generalist ability. I know in my real estate appraisal career, while I started out appraising houses, I soon after that got into appraising commercial property, industrial property, commercial land, apartment buildings, and then I got into all kinds of weird stuff, things like mineral processing facilities and casinos and those kind of things. But also, one of my clients asked me to appraise some small businesses. So I had to learn how to do that in order to serve that client. And then I had another client who needed to know what some cars were worth. Now, fortunately, by that time, I was sharing offices with a machinery and equipment appraisal company. And so I was able to talk to my friends there to get their input on how to do some of these things. I mean, in the end, it's not so different appraising a bulldozer than it is, a Jaguar. And so if you have a background in appraising, I would say it's not too difficult to learn to competently appraise other types of properties. The principles are essentially the same. You value property either by the comparison approach, where you look at what other similar property has sold for and make adjustments for the property that you're appraising, whether it's a car, whether it's a piece of art, whether it's a piece of real estate, whatever. Although art can be more difficult because there isn't the level of comparability is very difficult to assess. But for more commoditized property like cars, even horses, other types of other types of fancy livestock, comic books, like I said, coins. All of these are appraised by comparison approach, essentially. I know for coins, for example, there are catalogs that you refer to. I've done some coin appraisals, in my time. So you can learn how to do these things. Um, you know, uh, there are competency issues, and you need to make sure that you are indeed competent. But as long as you are, make proper disclosures, you're good to go. So I mentioned the fee that you get is 0.1% of the appraised value. Now, for anybody who's done professional appraising, that sounds very strange because appraisal standards and ethics prohibit calculating fees on the basis of appraised value. But as a probate referee, you're required to do so. Probate referee valuations do not fully comply with what's called USPAP, the Uniform Standards of Professional Appraisal Practice. But because you must comply with the law, you can charge your fees that way, even though you're a certified appraisal, another appraiser, a licensed appraiser, and you have a certification from the Appraisal Institute. Maybe you're an MAI, Member Appraisal Institute, or I don't recall what the designations are through the Society of Real Estate Appraisers. But in any event, because the law requires you to calculate your fees that way, you do. Now, you'll quickly notice that if you appraise $1 million property, your fee is $1,000. Okay, 0.1% of $1 million. That's lower than a typical appraisal fee would be. Okay, so even to appraise $1 million house these days, unless it's kind of like here in Los Angeles, where $1 million house could be a tract house, so that appraisal, maybe you are only going to charge $1,000 for that. But in a jurisdiction outside of very expensive locations like West Los Angeles, etc., an appraisal for $1 million property is probably going to be more expensive than $1,000. Okay, now one of the reasons the fees can be lower and you can still do well as a referee, probate referee, is the kind of reports you have to write are not nearly as extensive as those required under USPAP. And so your time is spent figuring out values, but you're not writing extensive narrative reports and that kind of thing. So you don't really have to worry about it. And indeed, even if you're using the forms that are common for homes, you're probably not filling in a lot of the sort of background information about the market, et cetera. You're there just to give the number. It really depends on your practice, but you might be able to do well. Even with fees, and especially these days, by the way. So appraisal fees are lower now, as I mentioned, than they were even 12 or 18 months ago. So 0.1% might be more in line with typical appraisal fees today than it was back in say 2019, 2020, something like that. All right. So what are you going to do as a probate referee? So the main thing is what I've been saying, you're going to appraise assets. Now, typically, when you're a probate referee, you will be appointed by the probate court to handle a particular estate. Okay. Now, there are other situations where you may be engaged by litigants in a case, for example, in a family law case, where you're engaged essentially directly by the litigants to do something. But the vast majority of jobs come through being appointed by the probate court, and so you're not going to get to, generally speaking, pick or and choose, what engagements you get and what range of assets you deal with. They're kind of, this is what you got and this is what you do kind of thing. Okay, so you're going to go through essentially the appraisal process, okay, for whatever types of assets there are, okay, and it's going to be based on the inventory and appraisal that is submitted, generally speaking, by the lawyer for the estate, typically with the consultation with who's ever administrating the estate, whether it's the executor, whether it's an administrator. That will just depend on the situation. By the way, if you have property in a trust, that is almost always exempt from probate. So a probate referee is not going to have anything to do with appraising property that is in a properly constructed trust. Okay, these are for assets going through the probate process, going through the court process. Okay, so that's why the attorney would work with an executor or an administrator, but not a trustee, except for in some rare case maybe where there's an issue between maybe beneficiaries of the trust, and they decide to bring in a probate referee to help settle maybe a dispute or something like that. That would be an unusual case. All right, so the probate referee then provides a report that lists all the assets and their respective values, and that report is submitted to the probate court. Okay, so it's not submitted to the lawyer for the estate. It goes to the court. The court has jurisdiction over it. Okay, and then that's, when all is said and done, that's really what the probate referee does. Now, they have to make sure that the processes they use and what they submit to the court complies with California law and regulation, but that's not going to be very complex. And in fact, there's a guide. Let's see, I think this is it right here. I downloaded it. Probate Code Section 404, Controllers Standards of Training, Performance, and Ethics that explain the standards. This is kind of the USPAP version for probate referees. And then there's something called the Probate Guide, which I think is about it's 72 pages. But it goes through, step by step what you need to do, for each type of property, and it's pretty thorough. So, and in fact, it even gives you a sample inventory and appraisal form so that you can see what it looks like and how it needs to be filled out, that sort of thing. Okay, so it's not, for anyone who has experience appraising, and not even necessarily an appraiser. You could be a real estate broker, for example, but you have a lot of experience in doing brokers' opinions of value. So you're not going to find complying with the rules and regulations that difficult. You're going to have to read them, and it'll take some time. But, like I said, it's not going to be a difficult thing to do. And then, look, your other responsibilities are to make sure that, you're accurate in what you're doing. That's the bottom line. So, You can't be sort of, pulling appraised values off the top of your head. So, different probate referees, I imagine, approach this differently. But in the end, you don't want to be in a situation where your values are constantly being challenged and shown to be inaccurate. Okay. So now one of the things that affects this whole process is um, a probate referee, generally speaking, is valuing the assets as of the date of death of the owner of the property. And if the date of death was in some cases even a few months before, and market conditions are changing rapidly, so then if some assets are sold uh, later, then the sales prices of those assets may be different than the value that the probate referee came up with. And that's understandable because the market conditions have changed. So no one is well, I shouldn't say no one is expecting. People oftentimes expect things that they're not going to get, but the court is certainly not expecting the probate referee to anticipate changes in the market. That's not the probate referee's job. His job is to do the valuation, like I said, as of the date of death of the decedent. So when we talk about accuracy, we're talking about accuracy as of that date. Okay, and look, oftentimes, um, some of these values are not going to be easy to come up with. I've mentioned this example before. I had a situation where a fellow died and he left behind a ranch that had a particular type of horses on the ranch. They were a relatively rare breed of horses here in the United States. And I was doing the real estate valuations for the estate, and the lawyer needed the horses appraised because they were pretty valuable. I think, in the neighborhood of perhaps even hundreds of thousands of dollars per horse. And this is going back 30 years ago. So I offered to find someone who could do the appraisal of the horses for him. And at the time, my younger sister and I both were really big into horse racing and loved horses and all that kind of stuff. So, I called around to a few of the people I knew who were professionals in that area and asked them about, well, I need someone who can appraise this type of horse. And they all gave me the same name for the same person. And it turned out to be one of the beneficiaries of the estate. So the bottom line was, these horses were so rare, and this particular family was so well known for breeding this particular type of horse. That was it, right? So if you were a probate referee, what would you do? Well, you might confer with the beneficiaries and disclose in your report that, look, my research indicated that the most knowledgeable person about these horses happened to also be the beneficiary or one of the beneficiaries of the estate, and therefore I conferred with them, and I based my values on the information that I obtained from this source. Okay, if someone wants to come along and try and dispute that, well, okay, fine. But the reality is the beneficiaries would be the most likely party to dispute a value. And if they were the ones that gave the information, unlikely they're going to dispute it. So these are the kinds of issues that you'll deal with potentially as a probate referee. So that's really kind of the extent of it. Like I said, it's an anomalous position here in California that we have here in California, and but it is an opportunity to be involved in the probate process in a way perhaps that you didn't consider before. Now, with respect to your own estate, if you appoint someone to be your executor who maybe is not particularly familiar with valuation issues, so just know that if your estate is going through probate, your executor essentially is going to be relying on a probate referee to handle that aspect of the estate for him. And so, okay, so good, don't have to worry about that. Now, if you have a trust, so then your trustees, generally speaking, are not going to be looking to a probate referee, but they can, they could apply to do so. Probably not the best way to go, but they could. Okay, so but it's still good for you to know that this position is around and available as a resource. All right, so that's kind of the ABCs of probate referees. I think it's important for us to know about them. Now, so that's the show for today. Tomorrow on business lessons from the military, we're starting later than normal. So it's the show is going to be at noon Pacific time tomorrow, 3 p.m. on the East Coast. Normally we're at 10 a.m. all our shows. Tomorrow is a special thing. I have a conflict at 10 a.m. and I didn't want to pre-record the show. I much prefer to do them live, and so tomorrow's show, I'm going to be talking about a very well-known officer in the British Army, Field Marshal Lord Wavell, who very early in World War II was fired. And yet, there's lots of lessons we can learn from his career, because despite being fired, he went on to have a triumphant career. I think it's reasonable to say. And so I'm going to talk about Lord Wavell and how that worked out for him, and as an example that we can follow in the business world. And then on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I postponed last week's show to this Wednesday. So we're going to be talking about economic echoes, how the changes in the economy affect us as individuals. And then on Thursday, you're saying, wait, what? Thursday? You don't have a show on Thursday. Yes, the first episode of Jiggers' Place will be this Thursday at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So this is an afternoon show that's designed to give us an opportunity to relax, have a little bit of fun as we ease on into the weekend. So I'm going to be mixing up a cocktail called the Horse Feathers, and talking about one of the iconic individuals from the golden age of Hollywood, a man by the name of Irving Thalberg. Now, if you ever watch the Academy Awards, you're familiar with that name because there is a humanitarian award that's given out periodically at the Oscars, and it's named after Irving Thalberg. So that gives you a little bit of an idea of who this man was. So we'll be talking about him for about a half an hour. Well, less than a half an hour, because I'm going to mix up the cocktail first. So thank you very much for joining me today. Wishing you a wonderful rest of the day, and signing off as I always do. Marie, you're my belle, darling. Courage at all times, my friend.